Gorgons being guaranteed to reawaken. This is what the story is about in the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon becomes dangerous and volatile as a grimoire because some of the names have been altered. And if you call forth something by the wrong name, and it's very powerful, and you piss it off, you can really do some damage to yourself. So, but a lot of the stuff in the Necronomicon is based off actual facts. It's based off actual fact. Actually, the Prophet Muhammad is actually the wandering Arab, and the story comes through the Sufi schools that actually fell into the public domain, the Necronomicon, and it was never supposed to be disseminated. The same as the Bible. None of those religious texts were supposed to be like books for everyday people to read. But because we all have to eventually have every means to discover the deception and to see what's hidden in plain sight, because we're supposed to have every means to discover it, they start to put these secret things out. But what they do before they put them out is they tweak them. They adjust it to paint the paradigm so that you don't pay the theme any importance. You get hooked on the character, or you get hooked on the writing style or the poetic format, which is why Muhammad was told not to rely on the poetry. These are all distractions from the underlying truth in plain sight. Everything they do in us, they telling us. With the Babylonian money magic, with the symbols on the dollars. They telling us they're capturing our energy and our money. And they're also showing it to us. Every day they're broadcasting to us that they're taking organs from our children because they're telling us in the news stories. You can pull up a news story, your kids, especially kids that's black, being found with no organs. They don't got no organs. They take all their organs. You finding them shot in the head and everything missing, or they shot somewhere else and their brain gone. You finding that babies are coming up missing and ain't nobody even looking for them. I ain't gonna look for them. They just ate him. Why look for them? They ate him. You can't go find him. They ate him. They eating babies. So, and they use these things as tools to oppress us. So if they use these as tools to oppress us, once we become, just the fact that you know something, you can't unknow it. Once you know it, you can't unknow it. Once you got it figured out a little bit, your brain going autopilot to unravel the rest of that particular puzzle. Because your brain is designed to help you navigate. If you start to peel the veil back a little bit, it'll rip the cover off. Your brain designed to do that. So that's why they use all of these cultural influences to drive us away from our intellectual ability. And your brain works like a computer. It works like this. When you studying and going to school, you got 60 gigabytes of information that your brain will hold. Just 60. Now, some people are what you call a genius. But they only got 60 gigabytes. What happened? Your brain will filter the gigabytes as they come in. You will store the information according to the level of accuracy. When your brain determines that it's not accurate, it's going to kick it out. When you feel that 60 gigabytes of memory storage, something happens. And this is when you tap into a higher stream of information that's accessible. They call it the Akashic records. That 60 gigabytes has to find another means or source of data storage, retention, and resolution. So it taps into what they call the subconscious mind. Everybody is connected at that level. It's also called the supermind, the oversoul, all that. It's the same thing. But if you fill your data bank up with reliable information real fast, you classify it as a genius because you are in that stream. You are able to filter in information that other people don't have access to and gives you a higher ability of problem solving. And like I said it another once before, when you teach a child, you take the governor off his brain if you don't tell him what to think, but in other words, you give him the tools as to how to think. That takes the governor off his brain, you know. So at that point, the child he can fill that 60 gigabytes up before he's 7 and tap dance around a genius that's 70 with no problem. Because he don't have the restrictions that the life put on that 70-year-old, he can only download the pure wisdom. And from that aspect, they call that child a genius. That means he 5/5 realized. When they call a child a genius or a savant, that means they 5/5 realized. But the savant, because he is realized, it comes out kind of quirky. The difference in the genius and the savant is Kanye West and Jay-Z. Jay-Z a genius. Kanye West a savant. Jay-Z a genius. Kanye West a savant. Now watch the difference. Kanye go on there, Jay-Z go on the interview and he don't say no outlandish stuff. He don't come in there with no oddball or out of the ordinary type clothing. And he have a coherent conversation and he don't say nothing that arouse like people to say, is he crazy? Check his sanity, right? The savant being Kanye. Kanye come into an interview, you don't know what to expect. That's savant. He don't do it out of ignorance because he's not ignorant. His artistic talent is so much stronger than his intellectual capacity that it causes his expression to be what you call an abstract expression. Whereas the genius like Jay-Z, his artistic ability and his intellectual prowess is probably close to even. So he'll come off as a more balanced person. But in real life, it could be the absolute opposite. But he'll come across as the more balanced because the abstract part is not visible. When Kanye, as a savant, make his abstract self visible, the regular people that's closer to what we call a normal see him as like some form of insanity or a lunacy. But really, when you analyze what he's saying from an abstract angle, you get to see what Kanye's saying a little clearer when you filter that back through your intellectual understanding, because you have to see it how he see it. And that's where we all drop the ball because we don't all know this. And they keep our communication skills limited because they don't want us to unify. Go back to the Tower of Babel. They keep our communications limited. So we don't know all of the ways that we communicate, so we can never communicate effectively. So Kanye having a controversial statement that the slavery was more like a choice because it was for 400 years. He was bringing attention to something. Anybody that want to know what Kanye really talking about, tune in on YouTube to Dane Calloway. Dane Calloway understands, but he ain't got to the place where he's going to tell you, he got to bring you along at a pace that he don't shock your consciousness to the fact that there was never a slavery in America and that what you thought was slavery was a war. And that King George won the war that they called the American Revolution, which was an attempt of the other war that was going on in the Afar Inca that they call Africa. And they was bringing the POWs over here, the same as Gitmo. They got parallels, because the parallels, remember, this is about the truth in plain sight. Watch this. The 13 colonies were Gitmos. Go back to the history books, and who did they tell you they sent over here? They dumped their prisons here. Now, most of the pilgrims died. 13 colonies. Why did they pick 13 colonies? Pay attention. 13 colonies. Now, y'all need to go do some research on the number 13 and what it means. It's not a bad luck number like they've been telling you. Go back to Egypt with it. Now, the war that they fought on the other side of the water when they brought their POWs over here and told them they were slaves. They brought the POWs over here. No, they told us they were slaves. Now, these were people of African descent in truth. But we was all one people, but we were one people from different clans on different sides of the water. We communicated with each other, as in the story of Mansa Musa and the spear rulership. Investigate that and you'll know we was one people, because Mansa Musa ruled out the remaining portion of his life from this side of the ocean. So y'all have to know y'all history. If he ruled out his remaining portion and he left the province over on the other side of the ocean, his brother ruled that out for the remainder of his life. And they found the spear rulership to be in the hands of somebody here in the island that they now call Cuba. Cuba was one of the first so-called plantations. Now you hear a lot of the native activists that look like us say that that they not Africans, they ain't never been slaves, and they don't know what they talking about. They correct. The African slave and the POW is what they talking about. The POW, because it was the war was being fought on both sides of the ocean. Here, they write it down where the stronghold was as the Seminole Wars in Florida. When you go to the Seminole Wars, all this is in plain sight, and they celebrated even with the football teams, the Florida Seminoles. They telling you the story subtly. It's all in plain sight. None of it is a secret if you follow the crumbs. All right, so now the Seminole Wars last for hundreds of years. America signed treaties, right, with the Iroquois Nation to settle the land. When they do this, the people that's of African descent are enslaved in what is the Middle Passage. Now you hear people say there was no ships of millions and millions of black people brought to America. They are actually correct. They weren't brought to the mainland because they didn't want them on the mainland infecting us with the liberation philosophy and the rebellious spirit of I will not be oppressed or suppressed. So they took those Negroes to the islands and tried to break them there. The ones that they could break, they brought back to the mainland. But they didn't break them as adults. They broke them in this manner. They would get a young girl to have a baby, and they would take the baby, pass the baby on to what they call a wet nurse. The wet nurse would then be shipped over to the mainland with the baby and passed off to another wet nurse who is the property of a guy that owned a plantation, which is actually not a plantation as in it wasn't his in the sense of it was his property. It was his right to work the land according to settling the land after a war. What they were trying to do was settle the land. That's what the whole conflict was. So you never was a slave, you was a POW. It's the same as Gitmo. George Washington was installed the exact same way as Muhammad Karzai in Afghanistan. And the country was set up on in two different phases. First, it was set up as a treaty agreement with the Iroquois Nation, which you see as your Constitution and your Declaration of Independence. That was when the European factions of the POWs because the Irish were the first slaves brought over here. And a lot of people forget that. They were tricked over here as indentures because the Irish had been subject to the potato famine. The potato famine was facilitated by the poisoning of the land by the guy that y'all call St. Patrick, who was the general sent to execute the priests there that was teaching the Irish and raising the Irish up so that they could ascend. And so they poisoned the land to make life difficult for the Irish and the Scots. The Scots being the descendants of the Princess Scotta of Egypt, who were being used to uplift these people and give them an opportunity to ascend. So when the St. Patrick done their dirt and they left all of those, what they did was they poisoned the land with dead bodies and waste product, all different types of waste product. And until that stuff recycled through the land, putrefy, break down, and rebuild, that's what caused the potato famine. And they flooded the land in order to flood the priests who lived, some of them, in subterranean dwellings. So the Irish were brought over as indentured servants, and this is why they say Europe dumped their prisons over here. Those were POWs, prisoners of war. There was no such thing as a prison. Everything you see as prison to this day is POWs. They're all prisoners of war to this very day. Because when you look it up, we are not under a law that facilitates the punishment of the physical withholding of the body. Our law is all in paper. It's in trust and it's in economics. Because it tells you that the law, in America, law is commercial. Commercial means it's for sale. Law is commercial. Commercial means it's for sale. That's in the United States Code. You can look it up just by Googling in your phone. The law is commercial, and you'll see what I'm talking about. From there, we find out that from the Irish being early colonists, the war that was taking place and the POWs that was brought up. When you know history, you can match it up. It's common everyday references. Now, you have presidents and early American colonial writers that we forget about studying in school, but they told us exactly what was taking place with this war. And they told us that who was the guilty culprits, what was they trying to do, how they was trying to steal the country. All these things is being told. But this was a dialogue, and what they call your continental congresses was actually the Iroquois nations was holding treaty agreements with the English, the French, and the Spaniards. And so the truth being in plain sight, they never changed the name of Amur Inca. They just changed the spelling and pronunciation. It's Amur Inca. And they've been telling you it's America. And it's not under the Constitution of the United States of America. That's corporate. It's under the Confederation of the Iroquois Nation. And if they don't know the Confederation by heart, and they claim to be in a position to hold authority over you, then they're not part of that. They're part of the corporation. So you got to separate the body from the corporation. And the confused movements going on now is people that's struggling to become 5/5 realize they stuck at 4.5. They stuck at 4.5, which is going to get them drugged back down to the 3/5 compromised again. So I think I'm going to wrap this up right here, because I think I've been rambling on, and I hope y'all liked it and everything. But I'm going to wrap this up here, and y'all can leave me any questions, inbox me y'all have any about what y'all heard, because a lot of this information is probably kind of new, but hopefully I explained it enough for y'all to connect the dots, because it's all in plain sight. It's no secret. It's all in plain sight. It's not a secret. So I want to go on to tell y'all, pay attention to when you see the media jump on somebody. And this is going to be the closing. Whether it's Bill Cosby, whether it's R. Kelly, whether it's any of them. If it's an old case, 30, 40 years old like Bill Cosby, you have to pay attention. If R. Kelly has been guilty from day one, did they just now figure that out? Or did they know all the time? Now, those are the only two questions. Because the way that they're presenting it is he's been a prolonged rapist for a very long time. Now, I ain't saying whether he's innocent or guilty. I'm bringing y'all attention to how they're using this to cover something else up. Whether he innocent or guilty is going to be determined when all of the facts finally be revealed, and that's another story. But as far as for if he was guilty 25 years ago, think about that. If he was guilty 25 years ago,